Welcome back to YouTube, and this is the next in our A Last Conversation with Jesus series. We're looking at the conversation that Jesus has with the disciples on the night that he is betrayed. In our first two videos, we looked at the incident where Jesus kneels to wash the feet of his disciples. We saw how Jesus showed his love for his disciples. We saw that love being expressed despite the presence there in the room and involvement of those who would betray him and deny him. And then in our last video, we looked at what it means to be made clean. We saw that it is God who makes our hearts clean, God who takes away that sense of being dirty, guilty, ashamed. Whether that is a guilt, a shame that comes because of what we know we have done wrong, or whether it comes because of what others make us feel. But today we continue. We're going to move on in the narrative to the next few verses. So we pick up the account in John 13, verse 12. After washing their feet, that's Jesus, he put on his robe again and sat down and asked, "Do you understand what I was doing? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right. That is what I am. And since I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you ought to wash each other's feet. I have given you an example to follow. Do as I have done to you. I tell you the truth, slaves are not greater than their masters, nor is the messenger more important than the one who sends the message. Now that you know these things, God will bless you for doing them." Earlier today, I watched the 11's devotion time with John and Hannah Gerling. And Hannah was looking at the life of Pilate and his response to Jesus when Jesus is put on trial. And she picked up particularly on the incident where Pilate hears the accusation against Jesus, knows full well that Jesus is innocent of all the charges, and yet is afraid of the crowd, afraid of his reputation and the risk to his job if he is seen to show weakness, and that gets back to Rome. So Pilate indulges in the crowd's wishes, but at the same time calls for a bowl of water. Just as here, Jesus gets a bowl of water. But where Jesus takes the bowl of water, kneels and washes the feet of others, Pilate, in front of the crowds, in front of his centurions and his soldiers, in front of the high priests, in front of Jesus himself, washes his hands. It's where we get that phrase, to wash your hands of something. As Hannah said in her talk, that is what we are so often tempted to do, to wash our hands, to pretend that something is nothing to do with us, that it's not my fault, it's not my responsibility. And as Hannah pointed out, we so often do that to try and absolve ourselves of any moral culpability for things that we have done. And what we will also try to do is to wash our hands of the responsibility that we have to others, to pretend that it isn't my problem. When the homeless person says, "I've got nowhere to go tonight," and it's the end of the day, and you're tired, and the easiest thing to say is, "It is someone else's problem, and I need to get home and wash my hands of the situation." when every time that you've tried to help someone through their emotional difficulties, you see them go through the cycle again and again, it is so easy to give up, to wash your hands. When you know that your every effort to help will simply lead to you being attacked. When you know that the event, the activity is likely to be a disaster, and you don't want your reputation caught up in that. It is easy, isn't it, to wash our hands and to walk away. Contrast that with Jesus. Pilate washes his hands and says, I have no part in this. That's in effect what he says. Jesus washes the disciples' feet and says, I want to have a part in you, and for you to have a part, a share in me. And after he has done this, Jesus speaks to the disciples that had famously and consistently quarrelled and squabbled about who was going to be in charge, who was going to be top dog, who was going to be Jesus' right-hand man. And Jesus says to them, this is a lesson for you. You know that I am your master, I'm your Lord. That's what you actually call me. But do you actually live by it? It's funny, isn't it, that the people that are often the most desperate to use honorific names and titles are often the least interested in actually following the advice or the instruction of the person that carries the title. Jesus says, if I'm your Lord, I'm your master, you should have been serving me, but I served you. And because you cannot be above me as your master, I've now set the example that you need to follow. There are two aspects to this. The first, the immediate, the obvious that is said so often and yet seems to take so long to go from our heads understanding it to our hearts loving it and our wills obeying it, is that should mean that we cannot wash our hands of others, but rather, metaphorically, we should be seeking to wash their feet. There should be an attitude of love and service. Nobody in the church is above anybody else. Elders should not be sitting and lording it over the congregation, but should be seeing their responsibility as to serve, to be part of the congregation. There should be that one another mutual submission where we put the needs of others first. Are we aware of the practical needs of those that come along to our church? Have we taken time to find out? If we know, are we acting on them? Specifically at Bearwood Chapel, we put processes in place to make sure that people can be helped. Food, a hardship fund, links to organisations that can give counselling and advice. And so we don't actually put it on one person to make that decision about whether somebody needs financial help or practical help or emotional support. We actually look at that together as a body. So first of all, as Christ has given that example of practical, humbling love, do we follow it? But secondly, Jesus says that he has cleaned their feet. And I think by inference we can say our feet. Therefore we should wash the feet of each other and of others. And obviously that immediate lesson of service and care and humility is vital. But we have already seen that the washing of feet is a picture of cleansing, a spiritual cleansing. So my concern cannot just be for your practical needs and the practical needs of the community. We have a sign above our building, the first building you come to, where the community cafe is, saying, seeking to share the love of Jesus. How do we share that love? Well, we will share it by practical service, by hospitality, by giving to the needy, by spending time with people, Of course, all of those things are vital. But if that's where we leave it, we have failed to fully love. We haven't really got anywhere near washing their feet. In fact, on one level, it is easy to do our charitable deeds and still hold people at arm's length without kneeling down and getting close. No. If for Jesus to wash their feet was the signal that he was concerned about their spiritual well-being, that they should be cleaned from sin, that they should be washed, that they should be free, then when he asks me and you to wash each other's feet and to wash the feet of others, he is also calling us to have a concern for the spiritual health of our friends and neighbours in our community, to make sure they get that metaphorical bath, that they hear the good news about Jesus and that they are washed clean from sin, to make sure that those who know Jesus are encouraged daily, that kind of daily foot washing, to come and confess their sin, to keep coming back to Christ, to be encouraged to stick at working for sanctification. Our love for each other will not just be practical, it will be spiritual as well. Who are you looking after? Who are you looking out for? Whose feet are you, so to speak, washing? How are you encouraging them this week? And I want to encourage you. Take time to text someone, phone them, have a video call with them. Check if practically they need help, but also encourage them. Ask how they are doing emotionally and spiritually. Talk about scripture to each other. Pray for each other. Look out for one another. Look after one another. Thank you.